Mr. Smalley, do you believe that abortion is moral?
Oh, boy. I'm glad I'm debating him instead of you.
This is Apologetics Live. To answer your questions, your host from Striving for Eternity Ministries, Andrew Rappaport.
We are live, Apologetics Live, here to answer your most challenging questions that you have about God and the Bible. And as we say, we can answer every question that you have about God and the Bible, no matter how hard it is. We here have an answer for you. And if you doubt that, just go to apologeticslive.com and scroll down till you see the little StreamYard duck icon. Click on that. Join us. Just remember one thing when you come up with a really hard question: I don't know is a perfectly good answer. I didn't say the answer would be satisfying. I just said I can answer any question you have about God and the Bible. Let me bring in my co-host, Mr. Drew. How are you, sir?
I'm all right. I'm very tired, and I think I'm getting sick. I've got the little tickle in my throat, and it's just, I feel it coming on. So I'm hoping it doesn't get too worse than this.
All right, get Zycam right away. And they don't sponsor the show, but
I had some, and then I have no clue what happened to it, but I need to find it again.
Yeah, go get some, and that works well. If I tell my bride that you feel like you're getting sick, she's going to tell you a whole bunch of things to take. She'll be, do this. But before we bring our guest on, and we have, for folks who are regular here, Tom Shepard tells you that you should just wear a mask.
You know what?
Is that to cover his face, Tom? Is that the reason why?
That can't be why, because I'm way too pretty to cover this up. But
so let's talk about delusion.
That was Greg Bonson's doctoral dissertation, so we can talk about it. But you know what? I should wear a mask. I think that would very much help, like it's helped the past, I don't know how many years.
Yeah, it has helped. People get sick. Actually, I was talking to my wife, that one thing that did help, this, we weren't going to do it in the news section, but I'll just but I will say this, as I commented to my bride as we went for a walk earlier today, that there's some people, they're basically going through the neighborhood and, trying to break into houses. Well, they're wearing masks as they walk down the street. Yeah. And years ago, that would have stood out and people would have been, something doesn't look right here. Mm-hmm. And they would have been called out. Now, not so much, right? So let's talk before we bring our guest in. And for those who have been watching for a long time, will remember this guest. Bill Cluck is a gentleman who I debated in Dallas. I think over a year ago now. I think it was a year ago, November, maybe. He probably has a better memory than I. He'll remember, or he'll look it up before he comes in, and then he'll make it look like he just knows it off the top of his head. But we did a debate together. It was his very first debate, and we had kept in touch, and we talked, and we actually were discussing the topic. We're looking at guys like Bill Maher and Richard Dawkins and the movements that they've been doing more towards saying, hey, let's not go too far getting rid of Christianity altogether. And he was just mentioning, that, sometimes maybe atheists have gone too far. And I was like, that'd be a great topic to have a discussion on, especially with a guy who professes to be an atheist. Mm-hmm. And so that is what we're going to get into tonight in a bit. But I did want to give an update. I was out in Arizona. Drew, thank you for you and Chris doing a show in my absence. I talked to Chris this week and said, hey, there hasn't been anything on the Matter of Theology podcast for a while. Why don't you just take the episodes that the two of you fill in for me and just throw that onto the feed? He was like, yeah, maybe we should do that.
I told him that literally like 2 weeks ago. I said, hey, take this episode, the one that we did on hermeneutics, and I said, rip it off of YouTube, put it on the web, on the podcast.
You don't even have to rip it off of YouTube. I can give you the MP3. I mean, you could pull it right from the website.
Yeah, that too. We could do that too. Yeah.
So we had a really good conference in Arizona. We were in Vail, Arizona, and the conference the theme of the conference was Christian responsibility in an unchristian world. And to me, it was really great, because this is what Striving for Eternity tries to do, is to go into smaller churches. This was a church of, I'm going to say maybe 50 to 75 people. Mm-hmm. And we had about that at the conference. But to go in there, most of the people had never heard of any of the speakers before. Actually, some of the people thought that all the speakers knew each other for many years and were best friends, but most of the speakers met each other for the very first time at the conference. I was the only one who knew all of the speakers. And we put this together to really encourage a local church, and just to see how encouraged they were and fired up to go out and serve Christ. Really, that is the goal of what Striving for Eternity does when we try and do these weekend seminars or conferences like this. And so, Pastor Jay Miller, Vale Valley Baptist Church, he was like every other pastor that we talked to, and they're like, oh, we can't afford it. No, we couldn't afford to bring in. They feel bad. And we try to say, hey, this is what we do. We have monthly donors that help us, support us, so that we can come into churches that can't afford to have a conference type experience in their church. And do that. And so I'm very grateful. I don't say it enough, but I am very grateful to all of those who donate and make that possible, because this church was just thrilled to have us out there. Now, the topics, Pastor Jay, and I may drop those releases on my Rap Report podcast. And so the thing that we ended up doing was Pastor Jay did a topic on that we had to be watchmen on the wall. Aaron Brewster kind of brought down the house, at least the first the first day. Well, actually the second day. Second topic, I should say, was Dan Kraft. And if anyone saw the pictures online, Dan Kraft is a 7-foot apologist. Someone asked me why, like literally, if you saw that picture, I should look for it and see if I could pull it up. But I had that picture, and people asked why, I called him the 7-foot apologist. And I'm like, because he's 7 foot tall. And you could see that in the pictures. Let me see if I could share this. Let's see. It was funny because one person said, he really makes the rest of you look short. And his response was, because they are. So this is Dan. He looks a little bit taller than us. There's a picture here's a picture of all of us with Dan. He's a tad bit taller than all of us. Yeah, that is why. Yeah, that's why he's the 7-foot apologist. Yeah. Not hard to figure out, folks. But he talked on apologetics is not what you think it is. So it was really good, got people thinking about what apologetics is and isn't. Then we had, I forget who spoke next. I forget who started us off in the morning. But I know that just before lunch, I know who was John Sampson, Pastor John Sampson. John Sampson basically challenged us on whether we're truly Christians, what true faith is, that people could be false converts. He also addressed the issue of evangelism. Right? It's Christian responsibility in an unchristian world. Well, we have a responsibility to evangelize. Aaron talked about our responsibility in our worship. And Drew, Pastor Dominic Grimaldi from Street Talk Theology. He's part of the Christian podcast community. He's one of the shows
a couple times.
Yeah. And so he basically said that message ruined his lunch. Aaron was telling us we have to consider everything we do should be for the glory of God. And basically what ended up happening was you end up seeing that he goes to lunch and he's trying to eat a tuna fish sandwich, I think it was. And he's like, I can only take 2 bites. And was like, am I really doing this to glorify God? I think it was more his nerves because he was going to be speaking. I then spoke on the issue of social justice. I think Dominic spoke just before me. I forget which the order, but Dominic, for folks that don't know, he gave a little bit of his testimony of how he went from organized crime to federal prison to becoming a pastor, how God changed his life. And, it was a good message. In the next day, Aaron Brewster talked about basically our responsibility in other people's worship. Then Dan Kraft really brought down the entire conference and did what I consider to be probably the best presentation I have ever seen on the issue of abortion. Mm-hmm. And that's an issue there in Arizona with a bill that's up. And that's really was the theme behind the whole conference, what got that with Pastor Jay thinking about it. And so that was very powerful. Kevin Hay, who you know of, Dr. Kevin Hay, we should say now.
They did. That class of Master Seminary finished their doctorates. Yeah,
that's right. So he is now graduated. So he talked about what was like for Daniel's friends living in Babylon, and because that's really what we're doing. We're living in a country like Babylon, and what is our responsibility? That was great. And then I again had this message. I don't know what I said, that if the messages were really good, then I chose them. But if they were really depressing, then Pastor Jay assigned them, just because I talked social justice, but then the second one was preparing for persecution. So yeah, that was another one of those ones like, oh yeah, everyone's waiting for that message. Not,
what's funny is last Friday, I was sitting in our meeting. So every Friday we have a sales meeting, and it's the whole sales team and then the owner of the company. And so I'm sitting in the meeting, and I get a text from my mom, and my mom goes, "Are you listening to Andrew right now?" I was like, "No, I'm in a meeting. I'm trying to find out if I'm doing a good job at my job."
So I didn't know your mom listens. That's cool.
Oh yeah. Well, so whenever we start talking, me and my mom start talking about eschatology, here's what she says. She'll go, "You know what? When I get to a place where she doesn't have an answer, she'll go, maybe you should talk to Jim Osmond about that. Or maybe you should talk to Andrew about that."
I love your mom already. And I should mention the intro, because there's a specific reason why I played that intro. For some who know, not just because we have someone that professes to be an atheist coming into the show. It wasn't for Bill's sake, though. There's a double meaning there but that the intro was David Smalley. And that was in Texas when a friend of mine, Matt Slick, was doing 2 debates in 2 nights. David Smalley one night and Matt Dillahunty the next night. And that was, because we got to know some of the guys, because it was a lot of people came to both nights, and we ended up talking with David and kind of his crew there before the debate. So Matt and I and our group kind of got with their group and had some discussions. I think we even went to dinner. I can't remember if he joined us for dinner or not, but he knew his whole argument was that Christianity is wrong because God is immoral, and he's immoral because he allows for slavery. And so when I came up and asked him that question about abortion, he already knew that I equate abortion and slavery because they're both an ownership issue. They are both an issue of ownership rights. And that is why he said he was much happier debating Matt than me, because I think what that was conceding that had Matt taken that same argument, I think like he would have had a really hard time after 2 hours of arguing that slavery is wrong to now say, well, slavery is okay if it's abortion. And when I asked that question, what didn't pop up is there was 3 tables of atheists that all went, ooh, because they also were around when they heard our discussion. So yeah.
Okay. So by what standard is God immoral, right? Right. How do you justify morality, right? What's the standard of morality that you're using to measure whether or not God is moral or immoral?
Yeah, well, that may come up tonight. And with that, why don't I bring in Mr. Bill Cluck? Bill, how are you, sir?
Hey, pretty good. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to have you back. Always good to talk with you. I know off screen is your ministry partner, James.
James Walker, the famous James Walker, here in the house.
We should bring him in because part of introducing you, I'm going to put up the link for your book club.
Oh, thank you.
Why don't James? I'm going to ask you to tell a story. How did you meet Bill, and how did you guys start the book club? And for the audio listeners, the book club is Atheist Christian Book Club.com. So Atheist Christian Book Club.com kind of tells you what they're about. But James, actually introduce yourself as well, because I may have to have you back because your background is quite interesting as well.
Well, I'm president of a ministry called Watchman Fellowship, an apologetics ministry focusing mostly on interfaith evangelism. So we mostly work with other religions. I'm a former Mormon and who became an evangelical Christian. So that kind of is what got me really interested in this whole topic. But we deal in the area of Islam and Jehovah's Witnesses and Scientology, just other religions. But I have an interest also in atheism. But I was speaking at a church. I'm in Arlington, Texas, and I was speaking at a church, a real large church, about a 45-minute drive. And one of my associates, Bob, came up and said, "There's a guy who needs to meet you, and he's an atheist, and he wants to do a Meet an Atheist Sunday here." And so I went out real quickly and met with Bill, and he thought I was the pastor of the church. I was a guest speaker there, and he said, I said, "I can't help you with that, but I would like to talk to you sometime." And so he heard I was in Arlington. And so, he said, our Metroplex Atheist group meets in Arlington every week, every Wednesday. And it's at a place called Jay Gilligan's, a bar and grill. And I said, "That's a half a block from my office. I'd walk there. I don't even have to drive there from my office." And so he was kind enough to come out and meet me at my office and introduce me to some of the leadership there. So for the next better part of a year, most of those meetings I went to and got to know Randy Word, the president of that time of Metroplex Atheist, and a lot of the gang. And we had great conversation. We talked about everything from the problem of evil to the documentary hypothesis theory. We talked about evidence that demands a verdict. We talked about everything kind of thing you can imagine. We talked about the Dallas Cowboys and the Texas Rangers, everything you'd imagine. And out of that meeting and getting to know people, we developed about a year later the Atheist and Christian Book Club. And we meet mostly by Zoom now, but we met for the first couple of years almost all in person, and it was just a local event. And so what we do is we usually bring the author in and we alternate books. We do a Christian book one month, atheist book the next month. And we've had some top-notch, both Christian and atheist authors. New York Times bestselling authors have been our guests before. Bart Ehrman,
the great Dale Allison.
We've had
mythicists such as David Fitzgerald, Robert Price.
Yes, and on Christian side, we've had Gary Habermas and Frank Turek, and just the who's who of Christian apologetics as well. And so, and it's become a friendship. You know, we said it's a respectful conversation between believers and non-believers on important books from both perspectives.
We just had Godless Granny on, a very sharp lawyer, mind like a steel trap. I mean, your guests are really going to enjoy her. I really encourage.
Yeah, September 5th.
She'll be on next week on this show. That's what Bill's referring to, and that's where Bill and I started talking because I forget how. But somehow I called you because she was coming on. I think I called you.
Become the glue. He's an atheist, but I teach also at Arlington Baptist University, and there's a new faculty member on there, and I know him through the book club. But come to find out, it was indirectly through Bill that he was able to get the job. So, Bill, I don't know how you get in all these Christian circles, but you become kind of the glue. And I know you because I know Bill, and so Bill knows you, so now I know you. So there we go.
Yeah. And folks, for those who are Christians, just keep praying for Bill as we do. He needs to come to Christ.
Let me just say,
that lovingly.
James has heard every argument against Christianity and God. He's listened to the best atheist apologist on earth. And it's just like, remember that Muhammad Ali, George Foreman fight where Muhammad Ali said, "Is that all you got, George?" And he goes, "That's about it."
Rope-a-dope.
Yeah. And it's just like with James, it's so you can listen to the other side. You can listen to other apologetics, and still James's example A of you can still maintain your faith and be a strong Christian.
Andrew, my problem, I've got lots of problems. One of my problems is I run in Christian circles all the time. And so, it's just like at my office, everybody's Christian as far as I can tell. And at Watchman Fellowship. And then on the weekend, I'm at church, Christians. I go home, my family's all Christian. And it can create like an echo chamber where you're not. I got convicted because I realized I was teaching a course I think at Criswell College on evangelism, and I realized that I had gone probably months since I personally had a conversation about the gospel with a non-believer. And I started thinking, why aren't I doing this? And I started thinking, it's not that I'm not having gospel conversations. I'm not having any conversations because I just run in those circles all the time. And so I need something that's going to get me out of my bubble, and it's going to force me to read the best atheist books available, because I need to know these things. But the book club does this. I know no matter what I'm doing all month long, I'm going to have a 2-hour session with a top atheist author and some very well-read friends of mine. And I call them my friends who are atheists. And the book club does that for me. I hope it makes me a better thinker.
You just raised something that I bring up all the time. For Christians, they should be evangelizing because it has a direct relationship to their sanctification. The fact is that if you're in a bubble of people that all think like you're not challenged to sharpen your thinking. That's why I have Drew here, so we can work on his eschatology.
Yeah.
I speak in churches all over the country, and in church, all my ideas sound brilliant. But when I'm in the book club, and I have when I've got some really good thinking atheists, I realize that some of my ideas are stronger than others.
Well, yeah, I've never lost a debate in my head. I mean, I win them all in my head.
When so we were attending a church where I am Reformed Baptist, 1689, right? And this is a old Southern Pentecostal church that we were attending, but I knew a lot of the people there, and I was burdened for a lot of the people there. They weren't getting the gospel. They weren't getting good Bible teaching. So I started just going on Wednesday night Bible study, and where I had moments to speak in, I would make sure to elevate Christ so that they could see big Christ, because they weren't getting that. What you started to see was that all of these people had grown up in an area and in a church where everyone thought the same thing. And then I'm coming along and I'm challenging them, but I'm not just challenging them. I'm actually challenging them with scripture, because they would say something and I'd say, well, if we look at this text, it doesn't say that in the text. Like, that's not what it means. Here's what the author means, because he says this in verse 1, and then here's his pattern of thinking throughout the text. And they did not like that at all. Not one bit. So I was like, you know what? After about a year, I realized they're not going to listen to me. I'm not helping anything, even though I'm trying to give them Christ and elevate Christ and give them the gospel. So I was like, okay, well, I guess we just need to go somewhere else. So we've been attending now another local church, but I know the pastor. He's followed our ministry for a while. He's followed Matter of Theology, Justin Peters. And so his preaching, very sound, expositional, the gospel woven throughout every message. And it's really good. And he's sort of technically family. We're kind of married into a family. So it's really good. Whenever we get together, we get to have good edifying conversations and stuff. So that's where we're going to be going. Because you try to make something a mission field, but then when everyone thinks the same thing all the time, the echo chamber that you're talking about, you're just not getting anywhere. And then I went and like this would be the only interaction with someone like Andrew or Aaron, Jim, whoever comes on the podcast that I would have of sound biblical doctrine. And really, I was ending up starving myself. And so I needed to be in a place where I could be ministered to as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Of course, every church needs an apologist, but only one.
Yeah.
Two apologists, always a church split, right?
I'm always up for
by the way.
Oh, great. Yeah, I always try. I love what you said. Every church needs an apologist, but just one. Hey, I'm always like, someone else do it. Someone else do it.
So Bill, for folks who don't remember you, give a little bit of your background. You professed that you used to be a Christian, converted to atheism. Let folks know about that. And then also, thanks to James, there's a little story that you may or may not believe in miracles, but saw one. So that piqued my interest. So now I have to find out.
Well, I used to go to Colonial Baptist Church in Cary, North Carolina. And one of the members of the Sunday school class said, Bart Ehrman's speaking at Barnes & Noble. I went, who's Bart Ehrman? So I went there, and within 30 minutes, I do not know anything about, scholarship, New Testament scholarship and so forth. And, read all his books. And by the way, I did see a miracle. I dated an aerobics teacher, and she got in a wrestling match with a guy and broke her collarbone. And the doctor, she goes, I'm going to be teaching aerobics tomorrow. And we laughed, and he goes, no, you got 6 weeks. And then one day she was totally healed. And I went to the doctor. I said, what do you think of that? He goes, she's a mighty healer. So, but anyway, with atheism, you go, sometimes I wake up and I go, how did I get here? Was it a Christopher Hitchens book? Was it, some bias that I might have ran into? I really maybe didn't think this thing all the way through. So one of the books that's had a profound impact on me that we've read in the books club is The Fortunate Universe by Luke Barnes, who's a physicist out of Australia. And the problem is it's very technical. Let me give you an example. You have 4 forces in nature: the electromagnetic force, gravitational, and strong and weak nuclear force. So you have the electromagnetic force that attracts electrons and protons and so forth. But when you get inside the nucleus at very tight levels, you have this strong nuclear force that holds the protons and neutrons together. So it's like, where did this come from? I'm starting to ask these questions, and I'm going to be talking to Luke to get more of a precise definition. So there's so many things, like the billions of galaxies with billions of stars. And I've learned from Dan, who works on staff, he's kind of led me to this cosmology, that when you have a star, you have the gravitational force pushing the star, trying to crush it, but yet you have thermonuclear reactions in the midst of the star that are pushing outward. So it's this knife's edge thing that
perfect balance.
And it's not just a few thousand, few million, billions of stars. So
and not just for a split second. They will be on that pinpoint knife edge balance for millions of years.
And like the resonance of carbon, beryllium and helium, they just got that much time to become a carbon thing. And if these things aren't right, if your fine structure constant, which is 1 to the 137th, if that's 4% off either way, you don't get carbon, and thus you don't get life. So he's brought up a lot of questions, and I'm kind of having a little crisis of faith here. So I'm trying to figure it out, and pray for me, okay?
Yeah. Well, actually, and what I'm doing right now is I'm going to send you Jason Lyle's latest article that is in the Answers Journal. A little bit of a technical article, but it is an article where he has taken a look at some of the James Webb Telescope data and sifted through that, and shows that it gives evidence of a relatively younger. 6,000 years isn't a long time; it's old, but just a lot younger than most people think. So I just sent that to your. I texted that to you, but it might be
Daniel
something.
Ray says he's our little resident cosmologist. He says there's too many Type 3 stars and so forth. So there's lots of problems. The other book that we had, Stephen Meyer, are you familiar with him at the Discovery Institute?
Mm-hmm.
He says things like the Big Bang, DNA, and these things, just to get DNA off the ground is a big miracle. I listened to the debate between Professor Dave and Dr. Torr, James Torr. And I have to admit, James Torr had some good arguments. One of his things was the origin of life. You can have too many reactions where you get things that gunk things up. And these chemists a lot of times have to go pull off the shelf pure chemicals. So you have problem after problem with the origin of life. And the chirality, you have to have the mirrorness, the left-handed things have to be, 19 of 20 of them have to be amino acids, have to be left-handed. So it's one problem after another. And I have to admit, I think he was a little passionate. We and James were talking about, he was really over the top in the debate he had with Professor Dave, but I just thought he had good arguments.
Yeah, and I can answer the question that you asked earlier of what actually holds it together. It comes right from God's word in Colossians chapter 1, verse 17, but I'll back up to read verse 15 so we get context. Speaking of Jesus, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on the earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So that's what holds everything together. It's Jesus Christ. So the scripture has the answer for you. Always has. So let's talk the topic that you and I were talking on the phone, because it really was interesting. It's something that you keep up with a lot of what's going on in different circles, especially those in the atheist circles. And you and I were talking just this movement that was, you have like Richard Dawkins, who recently came out and was saying how, basically he's looking at his culture as it is moving more Muslim, and he's starting to realize that kind of between Islam and Christianity, Christianity is a lot more tolerant.
Oh, you think so?
I mean, well, he was saying so. I mean, I would think so. I mean, when it comes to look at the issue of LGBT, we come to them with a book, and Islam would come with a sword, right? I mean, we're going to come saying we want you to repent and believe in Jesus, and the Muslim is going to throw them off a building, according to the Quran, right?
Oh, by the way, James has debated some of the top Muslims. You had a debate with who? Who was the Muslim scholar?
Khalil Meek. I've debated him several times. We have interest in that as well.
And he's written a book on Islam. What was your book?
What the Quran really says about Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I might have to go get a copy.
I'm going to let it slip out now and let you guys talk a little bit. I'll be following along, okay?
All right. So, and you were telling me some of the stuff with, I mean, there's guys like Bill Maher who have come out and similar thing, where we're seeing professing atheists who are starting to recognize that kind of what I've said here from the beginning when we started this show. I mean, I've said it, for a long time, is the fact that atheism versus Islam, atheism is going to lose. I mean, the Muslims are living for a life beyond this world. And so they're willing to die for what they believe in, where, atheists are not going to do that, right? Because this world is what they have. Right?
They're not even going to drive across town. Now, here's the problem. We have this Metroplex atheist group, And I said, what are you guys up to now? And they said, oh, we're trying to get prayer out of schools in the Fort Worth. And I went, what? There's no problem with prayer in schools. And even if they do a little prayer, I went to military academy and that never really hurt me. Or let's say at a city council meeting, you have a throwaway prayer at last minute. Who cares? I think this Freedom from Religion Foundation has just gone way overboard.
Yes. So, and that is it. The thing that intrigues me when I hear you say that, because you are a professing atheist, right?
Right. But if they want to put 10 commandments, I think, which is the trend now in schoolrooms, I don't care. In a manger scene, you're kidding me. You know, I mean, it's a conflated thing with the shepherds coming from Luke and the magi from, that could be a good little discussion for atheists. They could witness to Christians about the conflation of the two. I mean, just get a life, you know? Why
do you think that it is that so many of these atheist groups, we'll take the ones you brought up, right? They want to get prayer out of school. And the question I'll have is it all prayer or just Christian prayer? But then also they want to get the 10 commandments out, which again, that's not necessarily just Christian. I mean, there's, there's Christianity in its broadest sense. Catholics, Mormons, Jehovah's, they would all hold to the 10 commandments. Jewish people would, Muslims would. Why do you think that the groups are trying to remove things like this? Why is that their issue, you think?
They should try to embrace Christians. Christians have lots of questions. And YouTubers like Paula G are doing a wonderful job. And your guest, Godless Granny, is doing a fantastic job of, they're going to be talking about Moses, whether he existed or not. So that's what they need to do, is reach out to Christians instead of alienating Christians. And one of the big problems with atheists is the community. They just cannot do community right. Like I go to an atheist book club, and it's 12 old guys, including myself, and two girls, Teresa, my girlfriend, and this other girl. And it's just, you'll get a young person come and then they'll just leave. So, and they have got to solve this community problem, but they just don't get it.
Why do you think they go too far, though? Why do you think, like you're saying, they don't get it, but what is pushing them and motivating them to do it?
Well, obviously they're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. Have you not read Romans 1?
Oh, I like you saying that. I like that you brought it up before me, even.
That's James' favorite sermon. He's given a million sermons on that. So, well, the sin thing, I mean, we have a really cool member, Ken Daniels, who was a former missionary to Africa and has become an atheist. And he's never kissed anybody but his wife. He gives money to charities, just a fantastic human being, really humble guy. So a lot of it is, I think with him, kind of like myself, he just thought his way out of the faith. He just, who knows? And why atheists are like Freedom from Foundation are so gung-ho, to me, it's like if a coach wants to do a little prayer after a game, why would you want to go and cause a big trouble that it's not really impacting the culture that much? I could see if he wouldn't let anybody on because they were an atheist. That's another thing. But still, I mean, I just think they've gone too far.
Yeah. Well, I would agree. But, I think that a big part that I see is, and I want to see what your thoughts are. I think that a lot of those, well, let's put it this way, those about more than a decade ago, if I ran into on the streets when I was evangelizing someone that was like a hardcore atheist, the question I always asked is, what church did you grow up in? And I probably asked that to 1,000 people, and only once did an atheist not grow up in a church. And when they'd ask that, the second thing I'd ask is, what happened? And almost every time it was that either they were reacting to the way they were raised, there were too many rules or things like that, or they were like an legalistic church, or something happened in the church. You know, one guy, it was his sister was raped by a deacon.
Lot of emotional deconversion. Yeah.
Correct. And see what I'm noticing now, and I almost wonder if some of the, like you're saying, it's the older people that are in the atheist clubs, you can't appeal to the younger. What I notice now is that same thing happens if I go to like an LGBT type event. If I go to like where they have a gay pride parade, or I'm talking to someone who is a radical, very hardcore LGBT, I can do the same thing. Say, what church did you grow up in, and what happened? And it's a similar thing. So I almost wonder if my thinking, this is my thought, but my thinking is like, is it that those who are growing up Christian, they don't like the way they're raised, and the strongest way they could show like their disapproval of their parents, it was to go atheist, but now to go LGBT.
Well, let me give you an example. Godless Granny was one of the things she heard Aaron Ra, who really isn't an expert on the Old Testament by any means, say Noah's flood wasn't historical. And I don't believe in Noah's flood. But the thing is, if the church would have said, hey, here's the opposite view, that it's a blended narrative, the P and J writers blended the narrative. One has like 40-day flood, another 150. It came from the Epic of Gilgamesh, where it was a 7-day flood in a rectangular thing, a cubic thing. So if they just, and talk about Bart Ehrman. Oh God, Bart Ehrman says there's 100,000 variants, but most of those are inconsequential and don't affect the test. If they would get this out in the open and immunize the young people, you wouldn't see so many deconversions. This deconversion thing, if you go on YouTube, this has just gotten to be the cool thing. Every little YouTuber with a laptop can have a little show and talk about their deconversion.
Yeah. One of the things that I actually mentioned in a Wednesday night at this church, they said, why are our young people going to college and then leaving the church? And I spoke up and I said, it's because you are not preparing them to go to college. Because what happens, all they grew up hearing was, I believe whatever's in this book. If the book says it, I believe it. And then they go to college, they get an English class, they get a philosophy class, they get a science class, biology or physics. And that professor is just waiting for the student to say, that's not what the Bible says. And then they unleash the floodgates to try to disprove the Bible. And the student has no response, because Absolutely. They have not been prepared.
Well, give you an example. In Lee Strobel's book, I think, Case for Christianity, a paragraph, the girl says, I just got through reading Misquoting Jesus. My faith's gone. It's shattered. It's like, misquoting Jesus. Are you kidding me? That is like one of the most innocuous. It's not a heavy-hitting book by Bart Ehrman.
Right.
It's just, if they would have just talked to these things and had some open discussion with the young people, then when they heard it, they're not going to be blindsided. That's the problem. The kid, it's like, whoa, where did that come from? I thought this was a book.
The thing also with Bart Ehrman, here's what separates Bart Ehrman from some of the Christian writers that write on theology. Bart Ehrman writes for the lay person, for the person who's getting out of high school, just going into college. He writes for them, and he's easy to understand. A lot of Christian theology writers, they write at a high level, so sometimes you can't quite grasp it. So you've got to find the people who can speak on the same level, right? I mean, just simplify it, right? Andrew's one of those guys that can come in and just simplify.
He is, yeah. Very good articulator. Yeah,
I mean, this is the reason that in the book, What Do We Believe, that I wrote, chapter 2 is textual criticism, but at an easy to understand level. This is what Bart does. I've always said, when Bart is citing his work and being scholarly, a lot of it you could trust. it's when he's writing to the lay level and he does proof texting. So he'll take one true fact over here and another true fact over here, and he puts them together, and they don't always have, the conclusion he gives is not only always I would say the right conclusion. He obviously would disagree with me, but the thing is that you're right, Drew. We need people that can write at a lay level. I do think that part of the issue, on both sides, atheism and Christianity, both sides have a thing because it's human nature. If you can write at a really high level, people go, "Oh, that's so deep." That's not actually a good thing because it means I had no idea what you're saying.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, we had Bart Ehrman on the club. You can go to YouTube, and
Yeah.
It was one of our most successful events. So, but
Yeah.
people like Dale Allison, who's written a 700-page book on the resurrection. I mean, he just goes into Q and all these things. And the lay people, James and I just spoke at a church, and we were talking about, I was saying, well, Timothy wasn't written by Paul and so forth. And they need to, and then the minister goes like, quoting Timothy, all scripture. So he just came and just totally denied what I said. But just get it out in the open that a lot of scholars believe there's 7 authentic letters of Paul, but there's controversy. And then now do you see what I'm saying? Now you've let the cat out of the bag. And when they hear, oh yeah, I've heard of that 7 letters, Romans, Galatians, and all, and that the pastorals are disputed, so forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I mean, you were just mentioning for folks who didn't pick up on it, and this is the thing is, one always try to explain to folks. Right? You mentioned what you believe is different authors of the Book of Genesis, right? The
P and J mostly in Genesis 1 and 2, 2 separate accounts here.
So the idea there that people have, the liberal scholars, is that Genesis wasn't written by Moses. They don't know who the authors are. There's a Jehovah author, an Elohim author. There's the priestly author. There's the
J writer that tends to be more anthropomorphic. God's walking through the garden, more interactive, and so forth. Yeah.
And so the idea of it is to break that all up. Now, I heard that in seminary. It was explained to me when I heard someone that was trying to make that case from a Christian perspective. To Bill's point, I went, yeah, okay, I'm familiar with that, and I know the reasons why it's not true, right? It's just like the Q argument. Q is this supposed source. Bill, you were going to say something?
Well, you have an argument. You're not blindsided.
Yeah.
And you know what Q is. If you don't know what Q is, you're just kind of, how am I going to have respect for you when you don't know the most basic things?
Correct. And well, it's a thing where what happens is when people study this, they study these high, lofty things, and they come and think they're going to, a lot of times, and this is what, to Drew's point, when a church isn't preparing people with these questions, because the Answers in Genesis did a study and realized it wasn't at college that the Christians were walking away. It was actually much earlier. And I think a big reason is
now with YouTube, because they can just go Noah's flood, go to YouTube. I'm done. Yeah. By the way, James, he has a thing. When he was in seminary, they studied Boltzmann and the Wellhausen hypothesis. And what did you say? The thing was not to catch the disease. But
we studied it also when I was at Criswell College, but it was studying like a doctor would study cancer, to treat it, not to catch it. Hopefully. Yeah. So it's, but yeah, and the other thing about the modern scholarship and the cutting edge, and I talked about this with the infamous mythicist scholar Robert Price, that was the cutting edge of technology 50, 75 years ago, not today. That scholarship has gone past that now, and so when you're in the modern scholarship, you everything has a shelf life, and what is modern when I was in seminary or Bible college is not modern anymore. It's a moving target, and so Bill's patron saint,
Dale Allison, said, "Look,
Allison, 40 years," he said, "I've been studying this, and I knew more about the historical Jesus 40 years ago than I do today."
I asked Dale Allison, I said, well, you have a problem because you have death and disease before the fall. And that creates a problem because in Romans it says the last Adam and the first Adam, and if you have that, you've got a problem because that seems to be the natural order of things and why it impacts the atonement. And here's the most brilliant scholar of our time says, I haven't thought about that in decades. So another problem is you got these like our friend Eric Hovind who just young earth, age of the earth, Genesis, and it's like that's all they focus on, and they know very little about New Testament scholarship. And then you got someone like this is what he does. He studies the Bible, but he doesn't know that much maybe about Genesis. And I'm sure
what you're on to, Bill, is there's probably not just in biblical studies or theology, but in everything, there's maybe over specialization. And people are very, very on this very, very narrow topic. So you ask somebody about a New Testament scholar, about Colossians. And I'm just Gospels, man. That's all I really know about. And so there's hyper specialization. And so we try to be general practitioners in this. I want to know at least a little bit about all these topics. That forces me. The book club forces me to do that. Programs like what you do. It forces me to learn about these other things at least a little bit. But Bill, I think, kind of makes the mistake sometime of over relying on the expert. They have the PhD, so I've got to believe whatever they're telling me. But the truth of the matter is we function, I think, more like the jury. So when the prosecutor brings in a specialist and puts them on the witness stand, and then the defense attorney puts their specialist, we can't just throw up our hands and say, well, I have no opinion because they're the specialist. No, we've got to listen to the specialist, and we've got to adjudicate this. We've got to arrive as a jury of the peers into who's telling us the most.
Absolutely. Let me give you, we were taught, in one of our debates, we bring up the a cosmological constant that Sean Carroll, who's an atheist, when he says that we were way off in our calculations, that there is a cosmological constant fine-tuned to 10 to the 120th. So when he says that, and Luke Barnes, a Christian, says, yes, this cosmological constant that where the dark energy is striving, expanding space and so forth, as opposed to the gravitation of the masses and the suns and so forth. When they both say it, the Christian and atheist, then I can kind of take it to the bank. In one of our debates, James said, the gravitational constant fine-tuned to 10 to the 40th, all these things have to be the mass of the electron and so forth has to be just so. He goes, what's it going to take? How much do the numbers have to be for you?
10 to the 40th was impressive, but apparently not enough. So give me, what would be the number if you talk to Luke Barnes? What number are you looking for that would say, I'm in?
And I really didn't have an answer. So I just went 10 to the 200. I mean, there's only 10
you see, as an atheist, you just keep adding more to the number, right? Just like we add more to the age of the earth, right? So because the statistical impossibility is 10 to the 48th power. So we're, 10 to the 120th. We're beyond the chance of it happening by chance.
Well, that's the thing. Luke Barnes says it's the layman's dilemma, which is you have someone that knows much more about this stuff than you do that I've got to depend on. And the thing is, you need to be expert in paleontology, genetics, and so forth. Sometimes you just have to live with the tension. For example, you have the Cambrian explosion where major phyla 540 million years ago just suddenly seemed to appear, echinoderms and chordates like us. But yet you have the endogenous retroviruses that we can trace these back to a common ancestor between us and chimps, where us and chimps have about 114 locations where this same retrovirus is. So what can I do? I'm getting conflicting evidence, some implying a creator like the Cambrian explosion, some implying just common ancestry. It's very difficult. Now, I just try to live with the tension.
Well, Bill, what you do is, and I'll adapt a quote from Matt Slick. He uses this about church, early church fathers, but where he would say, my church father can beat up your church father. Well, my PhD can beat up your PhD. The authorities, because back to what James said, because of it being singly focused, can sometimes miss it. You bring up the the Cambrian explosion? We can answer that with a global worldwide flood, right as God said. So the answers are there. Like, here's the thing. The Bible hasn't needed to change to answer what we find in science. But science keeps having to change to find out, to answer what we discover in science.
Yeah.
Well, you look at
hang
Hugh
on
Ross.
to.
Go ahead. Well, real quick. Hugh
Yeah.
Ross says that, you do have to change he has to do exegetical gymnastics to make the Bible fit.
Correct.
with,
Because the science is his authority, not the Bible.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned Hugh Ross, because I love the debate that he did with Jason Lyle, where Jason Lyle just wiped the floor with him. But, in talking about Jason Lyle, he says, Christian scientists and atheist scientists, we come to the same data. We can do the same math. We have the same calculations. The difference is, how do we interpret the data? Right. And Jason ultimately says, well, we have an ultimate answer because we have an ultimate standard in the scriptures. We can go back to the scriptures and even the fossil records, right? It doesn't take millions of years to make a fossil. You can do that over the weekend, right? You just have to have the right conditions in order to do it. You've got to have flood conditions, as he teaches, so they all come to the same. I just love that. They all come to the same data, do the same math, but it's the interpretation and how you approach that data.
Well, and with scripture, Hugh Ross says, oh, my gosh, yeah, I know the earth was created 500 million years ago after the sun. I know the sun was created first, but Genesis says earth was created, then sun on day 4. So how am I going to solve this? Oh, well, it was translucent, the sky, and they just thought that it wasn't created. And when it cleared up, then the sun appeared. But
here's the...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The thing with Hugh Ross and then people like William Lane Craig, right? Andrew just said the science is their authority. And so when they come to these to discussions or debates with these atheists that have these scientific arguments, they try to appeal to their scientific position but then try to make an argument for the Bible. So they have to change what scripture says, those hermeneutical gymnastics you're just mentioning, in order to appease the scientific community, but also point them to say, yeah, but God exists. God did that.
You're absolutely right. Let me give an example. His latest book on Adam, William Lane Craig, says that Heidelbergensis man was the original Adam 750,000 years ago. Hugh Ross says, oh no, it's about 100,000 years ago. Swami Das, the Genesis, says, oh no, we can go 6,000 years and have an original Adam and Eve. So it's like they're all PhDs and experts. Who am I going to believe, guys?
Well, the one who created them all, God. Right?
Oh,
If you
okay.
think about it, if you think about, I read Colossians to you, right? Did I give an interpretation? No, but you understood clearly what it says, because all I had to do is read it, right? That's the thing, is the Bible has answers. Now, does it have the answer to every scientific question? No, because it's not a scientific book. But are there things that, and I know that within the atheists, I think that a lot of it started out trying to, I really believe that what a lot of the movement for atheism in the modern age is really not so much for atheism, but against Christianity. And the reason I say that, Bill, is one of the things I get with atheists, all the people, when I'm on the streets evangelizing, someone tells me they're an atheist. My question, and I think I even asked this of you over dinner, is, and it's anyone that tells me I'm an atheist, I say, what's your best argument for atheism? And the argument I get is Christianity is wrong, right? It's not for atheism. It's against Christianity. It's not against Islam. It is not, it's usually against Christianity. And so I really think that the modern atheist movement is really an anti-Christian movement. It's a Christianity is wrong. We want to believe it's wrong. We want to try to prove it's wrong. And that's why so much of it, like if you're familiar with the Reason Rallies, they had them in 2012, 2016, the first one. And both times it was an atheist rally where what they were trying to do was show that the atheists had a political, they were a political group. It's kind of like they argue that evangelical Christianity is a political group and has a big vote. They wanted to show atheism has that as well. So they did a big conference. They did it twice. Of course, they blamed us for the first. They originally said there'd be 5,000 people the first year, and it rained. And they're like, "Oh, it's because it rained. We only had 1,000."
God's judgment, right?
Yeah. In 2016, what I did was I asked a friend of mine, Ray Comfort, to come out, and we really tried to make it a big thing to get a lot of people evangelizing. So we had 1,000 Christians sign up to evangelize that came, and they were expecting 30,000 people, they said. Well, there were 5,000 people. So we made up 20% of the Reason Rally, the Christians. And they said, the Christians, they scared all the people off. Like, wait, atheists are scared of a bunch of Christians giving arguments. Like, that's enough to scare them. But it was a thing where when I listened to the talks that they did, I did not hear any talks that were saying this is why atheism is good. What I heard is either atheism is bad, Republicans are bad. That was the whole thing. Whichever Republican,
like
it was.
Kamala Harris's website, right?
Well, Robert Price in our book club got in hot water, didn't he? With the
Yeah, that was a little bit of surprising thing. I did not know about Bob Price. He's known now as being a mythicist. Doesn't believe Jesus even existed, but he is a Christian. He got a Christian background and was a Christian scholar who now is a mythicist. But he was also part of the Jesus Seminar for decades.
That would be
voting on Jesus did or didn't say this. And the irony of here's a guy voting on which words Jesus did say and which words he didn't say, while he didn't even believe there was a historical Jesus. Why do you have to even fly to the meeting? Can't you just put all black beads in and be done with it? There was no Jesus, but the interesting thing about him too, as Bill was talking about here, is he kind of breaks the mold of the liberal atheist in that he was kind of kicked out of the Jesus Seminar because he's MAGA. He's a big fan of Donald Trump, and of all he gets right in their book on his atheism and mythicism, that one strike against him was enough for him to be canceled by his whole community.
Yeah, and if folks don't know what the Jesus Seminar was, and before I explain that, I should just say for the audience, I brought Aaron in, and we'll let him tell us where he is this week, because he's a lot of times he likes to be in different locations when he's sometimes different states when he's recording with us. But the Jesus Seminar was, as James said, was a group of people that got together, liberal scholars, to decide what words, those red letter words, did Jesus actually say? So they had a black bead, a pink bead, and a red bead. So red meant Jesus said it. Black meant he didn't say it. And pink was maybe he said it. And so there was only one passage that was unanimously accepted that Jesus said. And that was with the woman at adultery, where he says, let him without sin cast the first stone. The only problem is most scholars recognize that probably wasn't actually in the Bible. So the only thing they have that they say, yes, Jesus said this, is the thing that we recognize it may have happened, but we don't think it was originally written. And the reason we believe that is when you look at early manuscripts, we don't have it, that account, or we have it in different areas. So it's kind of jumps around. So, that's one of the things where we don't think it was in the original. It may have been a true story. Doesn't change any of the Christian doctrine. But
you mentioned the Q source. There is a paper out there from a guy who was a student of Dan Wallace. He wrote it to get into his doctoral program that was on why the Pericope Adulterae is originally from the Q source.
Yeah. And I mentioned Q. So, and the Q is the idea of, it comes from a German word, Quellum. And it is the idea that there's a source document. And a lot of people that bring up Q, and this goes to the argument, Drew, that you made, is that we're not training Christians in church to answer atheist arguments. And that's where I think James Bill, the book club you do is good because it gets that discussion going. So the thing that I see is was on the boardwalk once. This was just after Barack Obama's the DNC for his second re-election. So he had just spoken on like Thursday night, and I was on the boardwalk Friday night, and so Barack Obama had spoken. And what happened was I'm talking with one woman and sharing the gospel with her, but this guy is coming in and interjecting, and I could tell from his interjections he had studied Bart Ehrman. He was just making the arguments that Bart Ehrman makes. And at one point, I just realized he kept being a distraction from the conversation I was trying to have. So I figured I'd turn and deal with what he was saying. And he was arguing, well, you have to understand there had to be a Q. And he didn't realize I actually understood and have studied this. So I said, you mean coelum? And he just looked at me. I said, that's what Q stands for. That's what it's short for. So he suddenly realized, uh-oh. And the thing is that a lot of times people use these and it sounds like really smart, but simple things answer. Like his whole argument was, well, there had to have been an original source. I said, why? He said, because where did Mark and Matthew and Luke
Matthew and Luke, their common source is Q, Mark, as opposed to Mark's source, the two source hypothesis. And Matthew and Luke, like the Lord's Prayer, similar amount, they're not in Mark, so they come, and sometimes they're exactly repeating. But here's the thing: Mark Goodacre out of Duke does not believe in Q, and he's as good as it gets. And here's the thing, guys, is you mentioned the Jesus Seminar. John Dominic Cross believes that Jesus is best understood as a cynic, not someone that's cynical, but lives off the lay of the land and lives by his means and so forth, and not apocalyptic. That apocalyptic words were put in later. So you have two of the top scholars, John Dominic Cross and Bart Ehrman and Dal Allison, apocalyptic Jesus or non-apocalyptic Jesus. They're the experts. I don't know where else to go.
Well, see, but you don't have to go to the experts, because we can look. What I did with that gentleman was this. I asked him, after I said, did Barack Obama speak last night? And he said, yes. And I don't remember the quotes now, but I gave some of the things he said. I said, did the New York Times report that? Yes. Did the Washington Times report that? Did the Boston Herald report it? You can go to any newspaper. And I said, well, what was the original source? What did they all get it from the AP? And this, in not realizing the trap I laid for him, he just, well, they were all there. They heard it. They were eyewitnesses. And I went, correct. See, the fact is that, and I, in my book, I quote from the intro of, I forget the author now, but there's a New York Times bestseller that wrote a book. He's Arab, and he had written a book about basically kind of like what Bart Ehrman's books are, basically saying that he walked away from Christianity because of the textual evidence. And yet in his book, his whole book is based on the argument for Q. But in the intro of his book, he states there is no historical evidence that Q existed.
Why? Is that Aslan you're talking about? Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing is, whether you believe in Q or not, there's earlier oral sources that contributed to the Gospels. That's an evidence. You have, let's say you believe in M and L, Matthew's special source, and those are two more historical, multiply attested witnesses to Jesus. You have Thomas. You have the letters of Paul talk about the Last Supper. He has sayings that Jesus said. So you have, Bart Ehrman has written a book, Did Jesus Exist? He says he certainly existed. And we've had people like Robert Price and David. I told David Fitzgerald, look at Galatians 1:18. He meets his brother and his best disciple. So what more do you need? And there doesn't seem to be an agenda. He just goes, I went down and met with the pillars.
One of the things to me that was kind of surprising is you study the whole mythicism. It's very popular on an internet level, not so much in scholarship, but you do have a few scholars out there, people. Robert Price,
Richard Carrier
has a doctorate, but it's they all hold to a historical Paul. And I'm thinking, guys, you lose your whole argument when you do that, because it's just like trying to say the Chronicles of Narnia. That's mythology, except the talking lion. Now that part's real, but the rest of it, well, no. Once you have a historical Paul, now you've got all the connecting points. Paul talked with Peter. Paul talked with the brother of Jesus, James. He met with them and talked with them. If a real historical person did that, you can't say that Jesus is a mythical person anymore.
Well, see, and Bill, the thing, like with where I see where atheism goes too far is to sometimes throw out common sense for the high and lofty, because like for example, what you said, well, there's these other the Gilgamesh or any of the other ones that you want to believe was used to, the Bible took it from there. Well, that's an assumption, right? Again, why would we have multiple accounts of a flood story or a creation story? Because they ended up seeing, the results of the flood, and Noah passes that on. And as you have people spread out in the Tower of Babel incident, what happens? They all have the same story that came from Noah about what happened. And so, yes, everyone had that same story because they ended up changing it, but it doesn't mean that the Bible got it from there. That's the assumption you make, right? You're assuming that, well, this one if it is written first, it has to be that the Bible used it, rather than the fact that what we know with common sense, you tell a story and you have people spread out, that story may change, but it doesn't mean that one got it from the other. In fact, that would be a hard thing to do when they weren't in the same area. It wasn't like today where we have an internet and books can be, and thoughts can be spread quickly. You didn't have information spreading that quickly.
Well, when I took a class in Legends and Genesis at University of North Carolina, I asked the professor, remember I'm a fundamentalist now, and I said, what are the, because he would just rip it apart he said Noah entered the ark 3 different times. It's not even internally consistent. So I said, what are the 7 pairs with the P and the 2 pairs with J? So you have blended narrative. But anyway, I asked, what are just tell me the chances that this story is historical? And he was Catholic, and he looked at me, he goes, Bill, you always have these unanswerable questions. He goes, like I'm an idiot. He goes, that would have to be 0. And so I'm like, I'm sorry, this is what I learned at church. So anyway, but go ahead.
I was going to say, talking about atheist overreach. When we had Robert Price's one, we had him twice in our book club. So he's the mythicist. He wrote a book. He contributed to a book, a compilation that was done by John Loftus, and kind of an anthology. So there's a whole chapter, and when you read the book on its various versions of mythicism or explanations, if any one of the chapters is true, the other chapters would have to be false. They all contradict each other, have totally different theories. But one of the chapters Robert Price presented was the theory is that Jesus was actually not a historical person, but was a mushroom. It's called the sacred mushroom of the cross. John Allegro, who was a Dead Sea Scroll scholar, started this religion, wrote a book, The Sacred Mushroom of the Cross, and this mushroom is hallucinogenic. And so the theory goes that the first century Christians were basically having hallucinogenic trips, and they were taking the mushroom, but they wrote their text in code. So when Jesus says, unless you eat of my body, you will not see the kingdom of God, what it obviously means, unless you eat the mushroom and have an altered state of consciousness, you're not going to know the real truth. So, I don't know very many atheists who would say that's possibly an explanation for how we got the world's largest religion.
Well, do you believe that it's actually, because you got the flying spaghetti monster and things like this. Do you think that they're truly believing this, or is it, like I had a guy in New York.
I was at the Metroplex Atheist, and a girl named Courtney comes up to me and goes, oh, Jesus didn't exist. Richard Carrier is peer-reviewed. And I went, that didn't mean anything that he's peer-reviewed. He's obviously existed. So anyway, now on the flip side, your guest next week, Godless Granny, was interviewing the Calvinator, this Calvinist guy, one of the best YouTube things you've ever seen. And he goes, well, we got the autographs, we got the originals. And she goes, no, we don't.
No, we don't.
Yeah. And then she showed, and see, there you go again. You know, Christians have got to be educated that we do not have the autographs. Doesn't mean that we don't have a pretty complete authoritative New Testament, because we got 5,000 Greek copies, Coptic copies, whatever. We can pretty much tell what the originals were. But when you go and say something like, we have the autographs, and Double G, to her credit, corrected him, and to his credit, he goes, I was wrong. So, you know, do you see the vast need to educate the Christians before they just go to a YouTube and, you know, that's the end of their faith?
For the audience, that this is coming from an atheist, a professing atheist, folks, right? So this is why I like Bill, right? Bill and I get in a conversation. He loves Justin Peters' ministry, and I'm like, it's like he loves when we call. There's a question we have in the questions we'll get to about Todd White, right? Bill loves that stuff.
I just called his university, Lifestyle University. I said, how much is the tuition? $4,000 for a bunch of garbage.
So, and this is what I think, it is why I really question why Bill is still fighting God and not just repenting. I said this when we debated. I said this at dinner. I say it here, said it when you were on the show, but last time, like, I don't know, Bill, what it is that's holding you, you know, because otherwise you seem like quite clear thinking. You recognize the problems in your own belief system. But I think that the thing that we end up seeing within much of atheism is, I believe, really not pro-atheism as much as it is anti-Christian. And I wanted to get back to that because I don't know we fully fleshed that out. But what are your thoughts, Bill, from an atheist perspective, with that comment? Do you think that
well, you got to realize atheists are pretty clueless. You know, you keep mentioning Richard Dawkins is not. If you want to read books on good scholarship, don't read The God Delusion. That's just softballs. Read John Loftus's The Christian Delusion. He's the guy you need to read. He's, you know, has the best arguments on divine hiddenness, problem of evil, or the guy, you know, we're going to have. Graham Oppie. Read those guys, not Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins. So, but the problem is, when I'm at the Atheist Book Club, I'll mention these fine-tuning things, and I just realized these guys are just clueless. Who knows how most of them became atheists? A lot of it could have been a lot of emotional factors, or they just read one book, or, you know, something crazy. Who knows? You know?
Yeah. So let me get and want to switch gears actually. And first off, I'll bring Aaron in just to say, at least say hello. Tell us where he's at today.
I am actually, I'm in my house, but this is like the third place in my house that I've joined the show from. Andrew's always complaining that the places where I join from are all so dark and like brooding and gothic and whatever. So I was like, you know, I'm gonna find a well-lit spot. So he'll notice. I don't know what he wants to look at anyway. I mean, there's nothing here worth looking at, but there you go. I'm well lit.
He's usually right about that. When you're usually on, it is dark because all I can see is this part of Aaron's face.
Yeah, just the head, you know.
Yeah, just that light that he's.
Yeah. So this is from my dining room. This was painted by my beautiful wife for a gift from me. So I'm super thankful for that. For those of you curious what's above my head. Hey, I want to thank you guys for coming on here. What was that?
I was curious. Yes.
Oh, speaking of art, I'm an artist, and I went to a furniture store and I said, "Hey, what do you think of my Rothko lookalike? His recently sold for $78 million. I'm just asking $100." And they look at it and go, "Yeah, we just don't like it." And it's like, in my mind, I'm like, Mark Rothko's lookalike. But the reality, in my deluded mind, I just, you know, said, "Okay, it's not working." So.
See, there again,
good try though.
Yeah.
scripture again in your deluded mind, because if evolution was true,
Well,
mind-
Andrew, we have to remember the noetic effects of sin. This just hadn't affected my emotions. It's infected my intellect, my reasoning. I can't even reason right. And because of the evolutionary argument against naturalism, oh my gosh, my thoughts, the way I process things is just a random mishap made for survival, not for finding the truth. So yeah, I've got all sorts of biases and problems with my thinking. So just bear with me, okay?
So I'm curious here. So I knew that we're gonna have one guest. And by the way, I always come late to the party. That's just Aaron come lately. I knew that we were being joined by one atheist tonight. This other gentleman, I don't know your name. What's your name?
Yeah. So Bill is on the right, that he
Yep.
pressed to be an atheist. James is on the left, and he is a Christian former Mormon. Both of them do the Atheist Christian Book Club, and you can go atheistchristianbookclub.com.
Yes.
And see,
I've actually
James, you're
heard of that podcast. I have heard.
first.
Well, what's just
fantastic.
fantastic, if I have a question on Mormonism, hey, what's the best argument against Mormonism, James? 1832, James, he predicted the temple would be built in Missouri, Independence, Missouri. 60 years later, Pratt writes, I mean, he can give me the details. So they say, hey, where's the temple going to be built? And he goes, wait, not all of a generation. It was supposed to be in this generation. There's still people 200 years later. It's total falsehood. So it's just a joy to be able to ask James questions on hermeneutics, on a variety of topics, obviously Mormonism. And Daniel Ray on cosmology has just really changed my whole view on, the cosmos and, fine tuning and so forth.
Well, I think you clearly, the one thing everyone in the audience can tell, Bill, is that you do a lot of reading. Okay. But my challenge is to study the scriptures the way you study these other books. And maybe this issue you have with clarity would be made clear.
Well, keep in mind, Andrew, I really don't have a life, so I have a lot of time on my hands.
Well, I know you don't have a wife.
Bill, I want to.
A life.
You said
I'm unemployed too, so that helps.
I want to ask Bill a question, because you maybe have heard this before. If you have, if I'm the first person asking you that, let me know. But I highly doubt that I am. Obviously, nobody can see our own blind spots, and nobody can know what they don't know. So, if this is a difficult question, impossible question, I completely respect that. But have you ever wondered? I mean, you sound like a very, as Andrew said, a very well-read, very educated individual, far more educated than most atheists I have met. So that to your credit. Have you ever wondered if there were a piece of information or an individual or an experience that you may encounter that would be the thing that would convince you that you were wrong? Or can you not conceive at all of anything existing that would prove to you that you're wrong?
Oh, absolutely. Fortunate Universe by Luke Barnes. That has just really put my faith in atheism into a tailspin because of his coherent, just remarkable arguments that it seems to be these fundamental constants and fine-tuning of the universe. There just doesn't seem to be a good explanation. And I've listened to my fellow atheists, and that multiverse thing, that's just so ad hoc. And
that to me was one of the kind of surprising things. I think it's a default argument. Multiverse goes this way. Okay, if it's 1 billion to 1 odds that all these cosmological constants, all these fine-tuned parameters have to be just exactly right, what are the odds? It's 1 billion to 1. Well, the answer is, but what if there's 1 billion universes? If there's 1 billion universes, then okay, one of them, we just happen to be in the right one that had all these constants. But the surprising thing to me is that the cosmologists, the atheist cosmologists, seem to be reluctant to go to the multiverse. They recognize it's not scientific, it's not observable, it's not repeatable, it's nothing that
more science fiction than anything else.
There can be no evidence for it because we can't experience anything in another universe. And so even one of our guest authors was New York Times bestseller, Krauss, Lawrence Krauss, who wrote A Universe from Nothing. And he mentions the argument, but basically doesn't want to play that card because I think he recognizes it's not a scientific argument.
So what do
Yeah.
you think about the recent developments in evolutionary theory that's sounding more and more creationistic in tone? So for example, coming to the conclusion that, all living human beings had to have a single progenitor, which of course Christians have been saying since forever, obviously. Recently I watched a short video where a young lady, a very young little girl, asked the physicist some questions about the beginning of the universe. And basically every answer he gave was a quasi-scientific version of the attributes of God. Pre-existence and intelligence and so on and so forth. He just refused to call it supernatural and God. He just made it sound like these things could have been all very scientific realities. When you see these types of things, evolutionism again as more study and more science is being applied to it, they're realizing more and more that the picture that's being formed from this research is aligning more and more with the Christian understanding of creationism than it is the historical understanding of evolution. What does that do for you?
Well, first of all, you have to have life originating. You have to have the polysaccharides, which isn't any easy thing to make a sugar. You have polypeptides, you have the lipids. The cell membrane is a lot more complex. All these things, Darwin had no clue. He just saw a big blob. He didn't have the electron microscopes. So to get life off the ground, in Signature of the Cell by Stephen Meyer, he says there's got to be 5 things that go right for even RNA to get off the ground. It just seems to be one problem after the other. And one of the things Lee Cronin said, that this origin of life thing is a scam. I mean, he's talking tongue in cheek, but boy, it just seems so problematic. If you look at the Tour Professor Dave debate, I've got to make a decision, even though I'm biased toward Professor Dave. I think Tour has better arguments.
You take our best scientists, give them an unlimited budget, and come back 100 years later, and they can't produce life out of non-life. Even if they could, all you would have done is you'd have proven intelligent creation, because assuming that those scientists are intelligent. But to think that it randomly happened, and just one of the factors that would have to happen is whatever life, abiogenesis that came out of non-life, would also have to have the essential characteristic of being able to reproduce. So how many times do you have life starting miraculously out of non-life, but it was missing the reproduction part, so it didn't last? But if you,
well, it's life coming out of non-life that was already created or designed materials versus coming out of things.
You don't have the part of this so-called Big Bang. You have everything coming out of nothing. It's one thing to pull a rabbit out of a hat. We all know that's a trick. But to say that the entire universe came out of nothing, Lawrence Krauss, we had him as a guest. By the time we had him, we brought him in person. It was the 20th anniversary or 10th anniversary of his book, A Universe from Nothing, maybe the 10th anniversary. And so this was looking back 10 years later when we brought him in to do the book club. And by then he had been pretty much taken apart by people pointing out that he equivocated. So he talks about in the beginning of his book how
quantum fluctuations.
Yeah. A universe from nothing, why it's such a deep philosophical question. But then when he addresses it, he says that there were, quantum fluctuation. There was things popping in and out of existence. But this is not nothing. It's very much something. So he, at the very end of the book club, he did make what I consider to be a concession to us. He said, guys, let me just say this to you. He said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said basically, at first there was nothing, and then there was everything. And I'm thinking, where have I read that before? In the beginning, God created.
Someone asked, I was converted at 17, and you'll find this interesting, Andrew.
Yeah, well, let me just put the quote up, what you're referring to before you refer to it. Rob said, I think Bill is going to convert one day, but unable to distinguish when he first believed.
Okay, well, I was converted at 17, went to Durham, North Carolina at 30, met an aerobics teacher, so we hung out, and I used to constantly quote the Bible, and she goes, "You can't say anything without backing it up with scripture and just talking about scripture." I said, "That's what I thought you did," but she was an Episcopalian, so it was just like, she could care less, but she's the one that got the miraculous healing.
Let me say this about Bill too, and I'm his friend, so he knows that I say it in love. But Bill, since I've known him for 6 years, 7 years now, maybe, there have been numerous times that I have sensed in our conversations, not so much in the book club, but private talks, we've had conversations. I kind of just felt, Bill, like you were like this close to becoming a Christian.
Oh, Eric Hogan and I said the same thing. We were like,
weeks later, I'm thinking, no, he's as far away as he's ever been, so he's given me false hope. But I have gotten Bill kindly to tell me that if he does come back to Christianity, I get to be the one to baptize him. So I hope I have that opportunity.
I am hoping to see that baptism. I will fly out to Dallas for it. So, well, let me just mention a couple things. We'll go to some questions that we had, but first it would be good to mention that fact that I know Aaron always looks forward to this one part of the program where we talk about Squirrely Joe's coffee because he loves his coffee. Actually, by the way,
wait, I've got to say something right here. I brought the Squirrely Joe's coffee home with me, right? And I can't believe I didn't notice it. But home from the conference. The Squirrely Joe's coffee has this. You know what color the squirrel is, Andrew?
White.
It's not just white because of a design thing. If you read the back, he actually has they talks about white squirrels, rare endangered white squirrels, which are native to Brevard, North Carolina. And whether I like coffee or not, that right there totally sold me. I will forever buy and not drink that coffee because of that connection right there. He's helping in the endangered white squirrels.
Yeah, so all of the speakers got a bag of Squirrely Joe's coffee at the conference, and we all the speakers, once I announced that Aaron doesn't drink coffee, we all thought we had dibs on his bag of coffee, in which he just turned and said, "But my wife drinks coffee." And so he took.
I was hoping somebody was going to walk up and say, "He who was without sin cast the first stone," because they had the rocks in their hands, and I was like very afraid what might happen to me.
Yeah, so Squirrely Joe's Coffee does support this show. They are a sponsor, and I just opened a new bag of Compassion that I got at the conference. It was the bag that I grabbed, as soon as I started. I basically told everyone, don't touch that one, because we weren't supposed to take them till the end of the conference. But once I started realizing all the bags started disappearing, I didn't want my bag of Compassion because Bill,
he totally called dibs.
Yeah, I need Compassion, so I'm drinking Compassion every morning. I love that he has names: kindness. He's got compassion. He has integrity. The only name
my wife asked me to bring home respect.
Yeah, you brought home some respect. Bill, the only thing I have a problem with, and as you guys who just made some lattes before we started the live stream, but James, maybe you can appreciate this, but Squirrely Joe names his decaf honesty. I mean, I think there's a problem.
It should be called hypocrisy.
I can't complain too much. I was a Mormon, so I'm not supposed to drink coffee, right? I used to say I don't even like coffee. I just drink it to make the Mormons mad. But that's not true. I really love it. Now, I really would like to try some of this Squirrely Joe's coffee.
Yeah. Well, to do that, just go to strivingforeternity.org/coffee, strivingforeternity.org/coffee. And on your first order, if you want to get yourself 20% off, just use the promo code SFE. That is how they know that we sent you there. So 20% off the first order. So if you're like me, that first order was a big one. For churches, you can get the 5-pound bags. That's what we had at the conference. So everyone was enjoying some really good coffee there. And when you get done and you want to put your head down on a pillow, don't forget to get yourself a good MyPillow at mypillow.com. Use the promo code SFE. Again, it stands for Striving for Eternity. They sponsor the show. Aaron, I do have a picture. Maybe I should show that picture too. I was, Bill, I don't know if I should take this personal, but I was getting ready to get up and speak. And just before I spoke, I walked over to where Aaron was, and I noticed that Aaron came to the conference with something. Now, I travel with my pillow, and I use that when I'm at the hotel. But I noticed that when I was getting ready to speak, this was Aaron with a pillow in the sanctuary before I spoke.
Hey, man, I'm prepared. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
I was seriously wondering there, was Aaron prepared for my message? He had his My Pillow with him there at the conference for my message. And he claims it was for his back.
I will say that it was comfortable. I'm not going to say what part of my body was comfortable touching it, but it was comfortable.
So you can get yourself a good My Pillow. Go to mypillow.com, use the code SFE for Striving for Eternity, and get the discounts there. There's a lot of discounts that you get there. I think they're still running their $25 sale. Much of their stuff is just $25. So good time to get that. If you've ever been thinking about it, now would be the time. So let's jump to a couple of questions. I know, Drew, you grabbed a couple of these from early on. Jesse had put this, asked this question, Bill. I think it's directed toward you. According to the Atheist, by what standard has atheism gone too far? Atheism has gone too far the second they denied God, the God they know exists. There's that Romans 1 again. This should be an interesting conversation. So,
well, according to the evolutionary argument against naturalism, we aren't competent enough to make a good informative decision on whether God exists. So, and also,
but if there is a God, then we are competent enough to make.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. And there's so many things that impact this question: paleontology, genetics, obviously Hebrew and Greek. You should be familiar with that. So it's a very difficult question. But apologetics, I have just enjoyed. I took a creation evolution class when I was at Providence Baptist Church in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I've learned so much about physics and radiometric dating, and that was from reading the Answers in Genesis of all things and all the creationist literature. And that's why I believe that this should be taught in schools on like a Saturday or on a YouTube, because that's where you really learn this stuff, is when you have to debate it, when you have to make a case. More so than just learning rote stuff.
What about Jesse's question, though, Bill? Do you think, of course, Romans 1 and you know what it says, but you haven't said that you agree with Romans 1. Do you really think that somewhere deep in your heart you really do know there's a God and you're suppressing that? Or do you think that the jury's still out, legitimately out for you?
Well, it could be, but I mean, we're going to talk to Luke. I mean, all I can do is defer to the expert, and hopefully I am having a crisis of faith, but maybe he can get me out of it. You know what I'm saying?
He's going to try to get you out of it to Jesus.
Well, he might play his cards. Who knows? So, yeah, I would recommend his book, Fortunate Universe. The problem is it's so detailed and deep. His challenge is to make this stuff understandable and simple, just like the tour Professor Dave. They've got to realize we're lay people. We don't understand all this technical stuff.
Yeah. You notice he hasn't answered the question, though.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah. So
what all I can say is, I'm like,
Jesse, I tried.
Where has atheism gone?
Yeah. So
where
if I
has
can
atheism
elaborate,
gone too far?
Yeah, if I can elaborate a little bit on Jesse's question, I think Rob here does so as well. And talking about too far, where atheism has gone too far, the idea in the question is like, by what standard is it too far, right? Who makes the standard for atheism and whether or not it has gone too far?
Well,
so how do you measure that?
We read a book, Stealing from God, by Frank Turk, who was nice enough to come to our club, and very nice guy. I really had a nice talk to him. And what he says is true, that as atheists, we still a lot of Christian morality when we make moral judgments. So yeah, I'm aware of that how in the world do I make informed moral judgments, which a lot of times are wrong moral judgments.
On that topic, we had that debate that we did at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, and you talked about the challenges as you leave a Christian foundation, that you have to recreate everything if you're going to be consistent. And so you mentioned, could you talk about how hard it is to develop a moral standard out of nothing?
Or just to make moral judgments. It's like you're just relying on your fallible, biased, that view that's just been formed by the culture, and so it's not a really
just
good
with preferences, really.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And well, the thing with atheists, our go-to is flourishing, and we want people to flourish, and I don't think, like with Islam, that 5 times prayer thing, and I go to a health club and the women just got out of the hot tub today, fully clothed. I don't think that's flourishing. Now, the great thing about Christianity is you can go to one of these hip churches and do whatever you pretty much want. You say a couple of prayers, go to a Bible study.
I would call that a flaw, not a feature.
The thing is, you don't have to put forth a lot of effort or time, which is great. It doesn't interfere. Just be cool and hip, and you're cool. You're good to go, right?
Okay, so Rob is asking you, why is flourishing morally good?
Well, obviously, flourishing to us would be to get in the hot tub without a lot of clothes, and
They're looking for a foundation here, Bill. You're stacking turtles.
Well, what
You're
I'm
never
saying
getting anything
is
solid.
flourishing to our Islam members is not getting vitamin D because they have all their clothes. The women have all their clothes on, where us, we get vitamin D because we can.
Yeah, but why is it?
So flourishing is very subjective. And the homosexual thing, do we listen to Andy Stanley, who says flourishing is embracing the homosexual lifestyle, or do we listen to John MacArthur?
You hit it when you said the word subjective. And so what we're looking for, you're right, that all that's subjective. So can you give us something objective?
Not really.
See, and this is,
I
this
really
is
appreciate the fact that
Yeah.
you're honest enough to admit that. That is very key, and I really appreciate that honesty, because I think too many atheists try to kind of gaslight us and try to build what really is a house of cards when they try to defend the objectivity of their moral standards. So I really appreciate your honesty on that.
Yeah, Bill, if I can for a moment, just say what I think a lot of people in the comments are already thinking, right? You've already admitted that you see problems with the atheistic worldview that you're in. You mentioned Frank Turek, reading his book, and a lot of Frank Turek stuff in that book comes from Greg Bonson as well. The idea of stealing from the Christian worldview in order to live in this world as an atheist, right? You're having to take from Christians. You understand all of those things. And even, you made a claim that, you're not sure of what I can't know everything, and I can't, how can I know what I know? Right. But at the same time, you're making knowledge claims as well. And so I think what everyone here is seeing is that, there is a crisis there, but you understand a lot of Scripture, a lot of what Christians believe, and you see the flaws in atheism and the illogicalness in atheism. And so what we're seeing is that you are so close. If you would just repent and come to Christ, I mean, it's there, right? You understand. I mean, we can't say you don't understand. You understand.
Too easy, Bill, or too hard?
Oh, no, it's, someone just noted about total depravity. I've hung around an atheist, Todd Hedgecock, who's a fellow professor at your college. I've known more about Calvinism than I ever wanted to know. So, I listened to Matt Slick and Leighton Flowers. And it's like both of them have excellent arguments. And I'm just trying to,
Yes, Matt Slick has excellent arguments.
They do.
well, they both have. So let's be clear. They both have excellent arguments, but only Matt is being consistent with scripture, which is what they're both saying is the source is, right? Only Matt is interpreting properly. And this goes back to something KT
I have a
said.
question. Okay.
Because this is just fitting with it. KT said, arguments don't save, though. It has to be God. God uses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, right? And so let me add on to her comment and ask this is when there's going to be someone that's going to be healed and he's like, go to this river. And he's like, what's wrong with the river by me? Right? And someone says to him, well, if he told you to go, like, is it that hard of a thing to do? Right? But what was he addressing? The pride issue that people have. So you don't believe or let me ask it the way it was asked. Do you believe your arguments are going to save you?
No, of course not. No.
Okay. So you keep appealing to authorities instead of appealing to the ultimate authority, right? God.
True.
You need to trump all the PhDs.
Bill,
That's what the Bible says, guys. I mean,
Go ahead, Aaron.
Well,
this
let
may
me give you a
have
verse. Let me give you a verse. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, which seems to indicate man's working out. For it is God who works within you, which seems to put the onus on God. So, Matt and everybody, can we live with the tension and say, I don't know how much God's part in this, and I don't know how much my part.
Well, see, and that's a great verse because that verse is not talking about how we get saved, but what we do after we are saved, right? Mm-hmm. So theologically, it's not talking regeneration, it's talking sanctification, right? So there are works in sanctification, but there's not works in regeneration.
We will never know.
Question I have.
We talked about this before. I don't think we were ever going to know the answer to all the theological questions. There's 2,000 people at my church, but I'm the only one in the whole building with all my theology correct. That may have happened to you.
Well, your thing, Watchman Fellowship, determines orthodoxy.
What my point is this: we can
so
know
help
enough.
Me here.
We can know enough. We can't know all truth, but we can know enough truth to have our sins forgiven and have an eternal relationship with the God who created all things. So don't wait till you know all truth. Just know that essential truth.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
So, Bill, many atheists I've encountered just completely eschew the concept of faith. They say that faith is an esoteric, solely religious idea that has no basis in their life. They don't have faith, right? How do you interact?
That's where atheists go so wrong. It's not a clueless, Kierkegaardian leap of faith. It's like, remember Francis Schaeffer, you're on the mountain and underneath, it's like, I know this mountain, there's someone underneath that says you're not just taking a blind leap. You have good evidence that this mountain is secure, that I know what I'm talking about. So yeah, Christian faith has lots of good evidence for it. That was birthed in Jerusalem, that you had radical transformations of the disciples. It should have just ended there. They had checked out. So what even people like Gerd Ludemann and the great Dale House say, there was a terrific transformation, which we can't really explain in the disciples' faith. And who could explain Paul's radical conversion or James the skeptic? So yeah, there's good evidence for Christianity. Is it sufficient? That's the question.
Well, so here's my follow-up for you though. So what do you have your faith?
Myself, which is really problematic because obviously I'm in business, and obviously I did something wrong because I missed the internet, I missed everything, but actually what led to huge successes.
Bill knows that one of my reoccurring themes is never underestimate total depravity.
Mm-hmm. Well, that probably didn't help.
So the reason I asked the question is this: I had the opportunity of talking with a group of PhD candidates who were getting their doctorates in psychiatry, and we talked through what I'm a biblical counselor, okay, and we talked through what a person needs in order to fundamentally be changed. Like, what does a counselee need when they come to you? And there's lots of talk about feelings and behaviors and so on and so forth. And by God's grace, I was without At the very end, without using biblical terminology, I was able to get them to the point where they saw that really the most fundamental thing that they needed in order to truly embrace real change was this idea of trust, which biblically speaking, faith, trust, and belief are all identical concepts. And so it's what are you trusting, right? And I think you acknowledge that. So, but I want to go back and I want to critique one of the things that you said about faith and evidence, because faith actually exists outside of having any evidence whatsoever. It's knowledge and it's understanding that grows from evidence, but faith actually doesn't require evidence of any sort. I think the apologetics cart has gotten in front of the apologetics horse and always pushing for evidence to support faith versus evidence just simply evidencing of what we already believed. So with all of that said, one of the things I think is interesting about your position is that you're so confident, tongue in cheek, and I appreciate your humility and I appreciate your jest, but tongue in cheek, willing to put your faith, your trust in your own ability to conceive of reality. You know, you've talked of yourself being a delusion, you've talked about yourself missing things. You're fundamentally putting your trust in you instead of making the decision to put your trust in the God of the Bible as he's communicated himself. Now, obviously, you know, if we were to say which is more trustworthy, the God of the Bible as he communicates himself or Bill, on paper, we have no problem saying the God of the Bible. So the question is, you're so willing to trust yourself knowing how faulty you are. What would it take for you to choose to trust God, knowing how perfect his word is and how cohesive it is, how he's as he's communicated himself, would technically be the most trustworthy person in the universe? What would it take for you to go from trusting yourself to trusting him?
You know, guys, this has been great, and you guys have just been fantastic, but it's really getting uncomfortable here. And it's your birthday, right? I mean, I am being very selfish. I'd love to stay, guys, but no. Your arguments are just getting too close to comfort.
I shared with something with Bill in our debate that we did, our discussion. It really wasn't a debate per se, but a discussion at a local church here. We had an hour-long discussion about these kinds of things. I ended it with this. If I'm wrong and Bill is right, I'll never know it. I'll die and I'm nothing. I have no thoughts and no memories. So I'll never know it. But then the problem is, if Bill is wrong and I'm right, he will always know it. And it's almost like not fair. But I realize this, and this is why you know, we have conversations like this. We're going to let Bill go. I think he took all he could take today. I want to say thank you, Bill, because he was kind of outnumbered. I wasn't even going to be in the show at all.
Oh, when James and I go to conferences, we went to New Orleans Seminary, and it was like every lunch we would talk for 2 or 3 hours, and I forgot I was an atheist. I mean, it was so fantastic. And these guys were just, and by the way, James has taken me to New Mexico, Florida, all over the place, speaking to these churches, and they couldn't have been any nicer. They've just been fantastic to me. So, and you guys too. Thanks for having me. And Andrew, you know, I love you, and thanks for, you know, having me on.
Well, Bill, folks in the chat are saying they love you. So, you know,
I love you too.
So, some of the other questions that we ended up having that we'll just wrap up with is, well, there was a question is a two-parter. and there's a question I was going to save for, you know, so Bill, I know has some thoughts on Todd White, but he's Amy says, okay, peeps, here's a question I pondered this morning watching a video about Todd White. I'd like some opinions. Do you think it's possible that people like Todd White really believe what they're preaching? Is it a misconception, or do you think that people like him are fully aware of their lies?
Okay, I had to come back for this one.
Okay,
I'm really curious of Bill's thoughts.
I just love Justin Peters, and here's the thing. Stephen Furyk, Elevate Church, in our own community, Robert Morris, who, what was so dangerous with him was his prosperity wasn't like, give me $1,000 and, you know, it was very subtle and very, so that's what really kills me. I do not mind John MacArthur and you, Andrew, of course. I mean, you guys just get, and James, of course, give it to me straight. I can deal with that. What I can't deal with is this slippery, like, give an example. Hillsong comes to Dallas, they're gone. And New York, and the guy, I forgot his name, who was the leader there, is like, he commits adultery, and they go, okay, look, you know, you can go have shots with your shirt off with Justin Bieber and be cool with him. That's cool, but we are going to have to let you go for adultery. What does he do? He goes to another church, Transformation Church, and they go, are you hip? Are you cool? Well, yeah. You're good with us. You're on staff.
The funny thing about Bill is he may not believe Christianity is true, but he wants it to be pure.
I do. Yeah. I do. So it's just a little thing, and I love Justin Peters. I love the work he does.
Yeah, and Rob kind of quoted the verse I was going to give out of 1 Timothy is they're deceiving and being deceived. Yeah. And this question gets asked of Justin a lot, and that's the only answer we can give. I think there are some who are truly deceived, and they think this is because this is what they've been taught. That's all they know. And so they continue to propagate it. But there's others who clearly know. I think back of ABC did a thing. Oh, this is like 30 years ago, probably more actually, where I think Robert Tiltman was the guy.
Bob
and
Tilton,
they had
there was about 3 or 4 of the televangelists they single-handedly took down.
Yeah, and because he had like said in college, this is what he was going to do. This is how to build it. So he was clearly a deceiver. He clearly knew what he was doing with that.
My philosophy on that is, you know, I'm not God, so I can't know somebody's heart. I can't judge motives. You know, only God can do that. I can tell you a person's a false prophet by what they say. I can tell you if they are you know, making merchandise of the Bible or they're misinterpreting scripture. What I can't tell you is what motivates them. So even like a Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, it's possible he really did see something in the woods that day in the first vision. You know, he was involved in the occult. It could have been an angel of light or something. What I do know, he didn't talk to God. And I can know that he is a false prophet because I can study his prophecies. But I can't assign motives to Joseph. Correct. Because only God can do that.
Yeah. And that's the thing that some of these people, I mean, if you're deceived, and this is kind of what Aaron was saying earlier, like if you're deceived, you don't know it, right? So
nobody knows they're in a cult, right?
Correct. If they're deceived, they're not going to realize they're also deceiving. But there are those who they know what they're doing. And who are those people? Well, that's where we just don't know.
Well, personally, I think Todd White knows.
It's hard not to, because he said 15 years he's never sinned.
Right.
He lives with himself, doesn't he?
Yeah. But here's the thing, right? He does the leg lengthening trick, right? The parlor trick. And he's so good at it, but he does that knowing it's a trick that he's not actually lengthening people's legs, right?
There's the whole theory on psychics. There's closed-eyed and open-eyed psychics. You can do cold reading very skillfully without realizing that you are. You know, there's a chart that you can learn when somebody says one thing, the opposite's going to be true. You can learn how to be a cold reader. I think some people do know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it on purpose. But there's also, again, the Bible talks about deceived and being deceived. I don't think it matters where we draw the line. Does it matter if they're purposely deceiving or they're deceived themselves?
Yeah. Good point.
If the blind lead the blind, they both fall in the ditch. The results is going to be the same.
Now there is on YouTube, there is a mini documentary that I just discovered last night on Todd White, exposing him. And actually, Brother John Elvin, who comments on the show, he's in the documentary. And then some other friends of mine I found out are in the documentary. I'm kind of upset that I wasn't asked to be in it, but that's okay. Doreen Virtue's in it, but yeah, it's very good. It's very telling about what Todd teaches, and then the things he said, things that are blatant lies that he's told, that were all caught on camera. So everyone should check that out. Here, hold on. There's a comment about it. The African Sheep says that's on Daniel C. channel. Yep, that's where I saw it.
Okay, so to close up, James, we talked about the Atheist Book Club, the Atheist Christian Book Club, which is atheistchristianbookclub.com. But tell people how they can find out about you at the Watchman Fellowship.
Our website is watchman.org, and there's links to the book club there and other things that we do. We have a podcast, Apologetics Profile, and also Good Heavens. Daniel Ray is the guy who puts most of that together for us. So it's watchman.org. We take the name Watchman from Ezekiel's Watchman on the Wall, and to warn people of dangers that affect their community and their families. And so that's what we try to do. Most of our stuff is on cults and alternative faiths, world religions, controversial doctrines, practices, and spiritual leaders. And again, I do have an interest in atheism. So we've done, especially in the last 6 or 8 years, have done a lot more on that.
So Fatima is saying, great to meet you, James. Thank you, SFA. So it's Watchman singular?
M-A-N, Watchman.
Okay, Watchman. Want to make sure for folks to get that. And then lastly, just to give, as well, as Melissa says here, a shameless plug. Shameless plug for our brother Drew. His cologne is the bomb. My husband loves it. Go buy some, y'all. So Drew, the problem is you don't have a website yet. So how can people get some with your new business you're working on?
So we do have a YouTube, or not YouTube. I did it again. I did it when you text me.
So folks, if you were watching him text during the show, it's because, see, I was more stealthy in my texting, but he wasn't. And so I said, hey, what's the link to your website? He's like, I don't have one. I got a YouTube. I said, sure. What's that? He gives me a Facebook link.
The whole time I texted
like,
YouTube, I thought I said Facebook, but we've got a Facebook page that's set up where you can, I try to post, not overbearingly, but here and there, just to give people updates and stuff. So we haven't fully launched yet. I've been putting out feelers, so some test samples, been sending those out. Sent one to Melissa's husband, sent some to several people. Kevin Hay, I sent one to. So
that must have been why he smelled so good.
But not your co-hosts here.
Well, here's the thing. So I put it out.
Well, it was like for guests would be the ones that would get the free shirt.
Yeah, I mean, we send our guests either a MyPillow or some coffee. So maybe you should send the guests some fragrance.
I can. If you give me your address, I can send you some samples. But the reason I don't do that, and I let people tell me that they want one, is because my co-host last show, Chris, he can't be around fragrance because his wife has a severe allergy. So I don't want to just start sending people stuff and then they actually can't use it. But the company is called Timeless Fragrances, and so we're starting with men's fragrances because I work for a fragrance company, a fragrance manufacturer, and I started learning all these things. And I go, I could do that. Let's try to do that. So we developed some fragrances, and I was like, man, these are really good. Let's put these out and see what happens. And so just started making it, putting it out. And so right now I've got 4 total fragrances. But I'm going to try to put 3 out before the end of the year. And then next year, I'm going to start a women's line as well. We are also, I was talking to my wife about it, going to try to do some room sprays as well. So I've got a room spray base that's coming, and I've got some nice fall scents that I like. So I'm going to try to put some of those out as well. Can do samples with that, but I never thought I would be this much into fragrance, but when you work in the industry and then you're around it all the time, you know, you learn what goes into it, how to make it, candles and things like that. You know, it becomes very fascinating. And so I started the company. We're going to do a soft launch once we get our Shopify and website connected to go live, where I can take pre-orders. Then once people make pre-orders and I get some funds kind of rolling in, I can get a lot more supplies to be able to ship out quickly. Then we're going to do a full launch where you'll be able to purchase directly from the website. And then eventually we're going to do TikTok shop, because that's what's blowing everybody's company up is TikTok shop. But I got to have the supplies and everything, because once you do TikTok shop, you have guaranteed shipping dates. And if you don't hit those shipping dates because you don't have supplies or whatever, they penalize you, and they'll take your shop off and everything like that, fine you. So yeah, we're going to do hopefully around October we can do a launch where we're ready to go.
Good. So we'll keep everyone up to date there. Next week, as we mentioned, we will have Godless Granny on here. And, you know, you guys had her at your book club. And so for the Atheist Christian book club.
Your seatbelt.
Yeah. Well, we got so someone sent me a video of hers where she was responding to latent flowers and was using it to say, this is proof that God doesn't exist. And they wanted me to respond to it. And instead, what I did was reach out to her and said, do you want to come on? Let's discuss it, because I think I can answer the issue of God's sovereignty and human responsibility. So,
well, Andrew, what I like about that is what I learned late in life. You reach more people by talking with them than talking about them.
Yeah. And that's what we try to do here on this show. That's why it's open to anyone to come in, ask any questions, whether it's in chat or, which we prefer, come on in and join. Just always go to apologeticslive.com. That's how you join. There's a way to participate down below. Just scroll down to the little StreamYard icon. So we will have her on. That'll be next week. Then the end of the month, the 29th, I have a friend of mine, John Harrison, who will be here. At least that's the plan. And I may end up having, Drew, now that I realize it, you may have to run that one. Now that I think about it. That's
wait, hold on. What day?
29th. If not, we'll have to reschedule. We'll talk
of this month.
Yeah.
Okay. I should be good, because in 2 weeks in September,
September we're going to be good. Well, yeah. So the plan is, and I really want to participate in this one, but I've been sent several videos of people that claim to be preachers, pastors, once studying to be, that are condemning Christian nationalism. So John Harris of the Conversation of Matter podcast will be on. I may end up being in DC, so I may not be able to make it. All of September, though, we are going to be talking counseling topics. I should have been prepared and pulled those topics up. So let me do that.
Hey, Drew, you got to check your calendar, though, because in 2 weeks, it's still August. 3 weeks, it's in September.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're going to deal with the topics in this order in September. We'll see if we get to all of them, but they're counseling topics. We're going to have Aaron, who will be late as usual, but one of our other speakers at Striving Fraternity, Anthony Russo. He is one of the other podcasters at the Christian podcast community, Grace and Peace Radio. He is an ACBC counselor as well, and he's one of our speakers. And then I'll have my pastor and his wife, who are both of them are ACBC counselors. We're going to deal with communication, anger, marriage, parenting, anxiety, depression, money, and sexual sins. Something tells me we're not getting through that through September.
You're not going to get through like the first two.
Yeah. Well, we'll do one a week.
We'll solve all of them.
Yeah. Easy peasy. So that's what we have coming up. The only one in question is the 29th. we may end up having to move that because I really wanted to be part of that discussion. So we'll see. But Drew, I'll send you the videos just in case. So James, thanks for coming on. Thank Bill as well. Don't go anywhere, James. Wait till we end the stream. And for the rest of folks, just remember to strive to make today an eternal day for the glory of God. And we'll see you next time.